The true tragedy of a golden cage is that the prisoner often spends their life polishing the bars instead of looking for the key. Silas stood on his high-rise balcony, overlooking a city that glittered like fallen stars, holding a glass of vintage wine that cost more than his father had earned in a month. To the world, Silas was the definition of success, but as he stared at the stack of luxury bills on his marble counter, he felt like a man running on a treadmill that was slowly accelerating toward a cliff. He was a slave to a high-octane lifestyle, trapped in a cycle of earning to spend and spending to belong. Below him, in the quiet garden of the estate, he saw his neighbor, Thomas, sitting peacefully with a book. Thomas didn't have the flashy car or the designer suits, yet he had recently retired at 40, while Silas feared he would be chained to his desk until his hair turned white. Desperate for the secret, Silas descended to the garden and asked the question that had been burning in his chest. "How did you escape the race while I'm still drowning in it?" Thomas looked up and gestured to a magnificent oak tree towering over the garden wall, explaining that wealth is not a number in a bank, but a forest grown from the discipline of the hands. He told Silas that most people are like woodcutters who chop down every sapling the moment it breaks the soil, just to stay warm for one night. Silas had been chopping down his future every time he bought a new watch or upgraded his apartment, just to impress people he didn't even like. To master the art of wealth, one must transition from being a consumer of products to a creator of systems. Thomas explained that every dollar is a tiny soldier. If you send them to the mall, they are captured and never return. But if you send them to buy assets, land, businesses, or knowledge, they capture more soldiers for you. This shift in mindset is the hook that catches the wind of freedom. In English, we call this financial independence, a state where your soldiers are so numerous and effective that you no longer need to step onto the battlefield yourself. The transformation began when Silas realized that his biggest enemy wasn't his boss or the economy, but his own desire to look rich instead of being wealthy. He began to practice the rule of the harvest, where he lived on a fraction of his income and treated the rest as sacred seeds. He watched his friends buy the latest gadgets while he quietly moved his money into engines of growth, investments that worked while he slept. It was difficult at first to resist the social pressure of the city, but Thomas reminded him that the loudest person in the room is often the one with the most debt. Silas started to see his bank account not as a bucket of water to be used, but as a well that was slowly filling up from an underground spring. He learned that wealth is the silence of a growing forest, not the noise of a crashing waterfall. By changing his vocabulary and his habits, he was no longer just learning words. He was learning the grammar of a free life. Years later, Silas sat on the same balcony, but the heavy weight in his chest was gone. He still had the view, but he no longer had the bills, because the soldiers he had saved years ago had grown into a mighty army that provided for his every need without him lifting a finger. He realized that to make your money work for you, you must first be willing to work for your future self. The story of wealth is ultimately a story of patience, a narrative where the protagonist chooses a permanent legacy over a temporary thrill. As he watched the sunset, Silas knew he had finally mastered the art of wealth. He had stopped chasing the golden coins and had instead built the orchard that produced them. He was no longer a prisoner of the city's lights. He was the master of his own time, proving that the greatest thing money can ever buy is the ability to walk away from it.